everybody, welcome back to City Skylines, the city of Lawrence. In this episode, we are going to be taking quite a different approach to city building. In fact, we're not really going to be focusing on the main city at all in this episode. In this episode, we are going to be focusing more on the rural side of town. Right across the little lake. And a couple, I'm not quite sure when it was made in relation to the videos I've uploaded on YouTube, but I did put a dam against the lake because it kind of didn't look right, just a river forming a lake for no reason. So I put the dam in there, and I also extended a little creek, as you can see, flowing right here. I'm not sure why it's flowing backwards, but there is a little creek that does flow right there off the dam. So it creates quite a deep canyon, and I decided that rather than develop that area or leave it just undeveloped and as barren land as it was before, I would turn it into a national park or a reserve or something to put it to use. So basically this episode is nothing but nature related, putting paths, trees, bushes, tons and tons of foliage in general. So if you're not into that, unfortunately this video is probably not for you, but for those of you who are, well, it gets quite detailed. And this is probably going to be part one of this because it's just such a massive sprawl of land, and I either would make it one really long video of just me making trees and whatnot, or I could divide it into two videos, and in the second video I'm probably going to make a little tourist center maybe with some commercial buildings and whatnot, because there is a metro line that is extended that cuts right through the park and has a nice bridge that crosses the creek. So putting that to use for that commercial area I was talking about would make a lot of sense. But moving on from that, right now I'm just putting in some guardrails and whatnot, so people don't, fall and injure themselves. And it also protects them from the rock face that you can see right there. And I go ahead and later on cover those rock faces, pretty much anything that isn't grass. I cover it with the default game provided big rocks. I'm not sure, they're not really decals. The big rock props. I use them because they conform to the terrain and they're fairly large, and I didn't, have big rocks downloaded and ready to go, and I kind of wanted to get this, finish what I was doing instead of having to get off my game and then download it, and then, it'd be too much of a hassle. It's not really a hassle, but I'm just lazy. And you could see that the bridge right there for the metro. But moving on from that side note about rocks, over here I was going to put the path going underneath the metro line instead of making a bridge. And I was hoping to get a tunnel, but unfortunately I could not get a tunnel with that specific path that I was using. So I decided to make a little gouged out area, probably some rain runoff created this, and instead the path would go under there. And the path that I'm using is actually the dirt alleyway. I had originally used the dirt pedestrian paths, the single tile ones, but unfortunately those did not allow me to use Move It on them. I'm not sure if you can use Move It on them. When I tried, it wasn't working, so they weren't really conforming to the hills as I'd liked it, and there were these really steep and jagged edges, and I couldn't really fix them, so I took them out and replaced them with the dirt alleyway, which worked fine in the end, so I'm not really too worried about that. And surrounding the national park, as you can see, is a national road. This is probably the first time I've used the national road in this city for long term. There was a national road previously, but it got destroyed once the city expanded to that direction. I think it was on the other side of the turbine interchange that I made a couple episodes ago. But now we are getting into the main meat of the situation, if you would like to say, meat and potatoes. Putting down all the props of trees and grass and bushes and you name it, just tons and tons of greenery going around. I basically lined the entire riverbank with the extra tall grass. I believe Mr. Mason made. Mr. Mason makes a ton of tree props and bushes and scenery stuff, so I'm gonna assume Mr. Mason made them because it's really really high quality. However, if somebody else made it, please correct me. I'm really bad with names and just keeping track of who makes what. But getting on to what I was saying before, we are putting in all these trees. And something that is a bit different between this national park and the rest of the city is that basically any park within the city is made with the London plane tree, I believe it's called, and the green sugar maple. And this park, as you can see, is made up of the live oak tree, the lantana, I think, the sugar maple, and some pine tree. I think it's like a Siberian pine. And that's very different from all the parks that I see, or that you guys see in the city. And the reason for that is this looks more wild, whereas the city parks would be more, tame and man-made. And this looks more wild, more natural, and also the live oak trees that I use. They're really big. They take up tons of space, so I could occupy more space with fewer trees. So that's always a good thing, especially since I don't have the the unlimited tree tool, the unlimited tree mod. I don't have that, and I'm pretty sure I use I don't know, tons and tons of trees are on this park. I'm pretty sure I brought my limit. Pretty sure I brought myself almost to the limit. That's what I was trying to say. For the amount of trees that I can have in my map, because this is a lot. It's not even just the trees, but I also went around copy and pasting chunks of just grass and bushes and rose bushes and whatnot, and that also itself has tons of props in it. And another thing is that these nothing that I discovered while doing this is that the default rocks that I had mentioned before, as you just saw then, they block the water, and that's actually very useful to know because for future maps, if you want to create rapids or maybe just alter the water for your city, you could just use the default game rocks, and you get the job done. But as previously mentioned, like I was saying, how I use tons of bushes and whatnot, as you can see, there I go right now, just copy and pasting large chunks of those grasses and bushes to make the world look more wilderness and wild and natural. After all, it is just completely untouched forest. Well, untouched aside from the fact that there are paths and whatnot, but other than that, it's not been developed. And I'd like to imagine that the rest of the region looked like this before the city came in, so it's good to have a breath of fresh air and fresh scenery instead of it just being all concrete and steel and grunginess. But now, just extending the metro line. I haven't connected it to the main line yet. It kind of just extends over there right across the river from the projects by the nuke plant. That doesn't sound right. Projects next to the nuke plant, but that is the way it is. So over here, originally it was going to be a campground. So I tried looking for tents, I tried looking for canopies, and unfortunately I didn't have any downloaded. I do have some downloaded now, but at the time of recording I did not. So I decided, instead of making it a campground, I would make it a rest point. So there are some picnic tables with canopies, some picnic tables without canopies, that little, I'm not sure what that thing is, and then also the steel awning that has some more picnic tables underneath. So I thought that turned out really nice. And now moving on to here, this is the area where you would park your car, just general parking. I just kind of hastily threw that down. I didn't like it, obviously. So I went and deleted it and put a new row down and spaced them out evenly and as straight as I could. And I just put the cars in. They only park on one side, so I thought that worked. And then this open space over here, I put another steel awning in and 5 more picnic tables, just like before. So this is the parking area where you would obviously drive from the city, park your car, and then head out onto the trails. And while doing that, I also discovered that I had this little sign. The sign's used for a train station, but I decided to repurpose it and use it as, I guess, a nature guide that you would find in real life that say, you know, what's down this path, what trees and what birds you might see. So putting that on certain intersections of the paths that I made also brings out the realism in the area. And again, just tons and tons of grass, as you can see me putting down. There's so many trees and props on this side of the town that the frame rate is probably just as bad as downtown, and it's pretty bad looking downtown. In fact, the frames that I'm getting in this game, well, not really the frames, but the simulation is running so slow in this game that if you look at the bottom left of the screen, you can see that I am on ×1 speed, and you can see how fast that bar is going by. Now, I'd like to point out that the video is sped up by ×6, and ×6 speed, the game simulation at ×1 sped up to ×6 is that fast. ×2 and ×3 speed, I don't even think there's really a difference. The game has to there's just so much going on in my city. There's such a high population. I assume it's the high population that the simulation can't really handle it, and so it doesn't really process at the proper speed that it should. So that's it's a bit of annoying when you're trying to, especially when water starts flooding and you have to get the water out of the area, but you can't because the game is running slow no matter what speed you put it on. But getting sidetracked again. Here there was another parking area, and as you saw, I didn't put the little curbs in. That was kind of just a free-for-all parking zone. So just basically a big dirt patch surrounded with the default game-provided logs. Again, those are nice. And just you just drive your car up and park it and head on out to the trails. So I connected another trail there, and again, like I said before, covering all the rock faces that I can with the default rocks, because they do conform to the terrain and they are quite large. And putting some lantanas. Again, I think they're lantanas. I don't know. They're probably not. I think lantana's something else. But just putting those out and on the rock faces. Those are the only trees and whatnot that actually grow along the rock face. And over here is probably my favorite part of the build. It's that little lookout point with the wooden bridge, wooden viaduct. I'm not sure what that would be called, but it overhangs over the rock face and is surrounded by bushes, surrounded by trees and whatnot. Right now I'm just deleting trees that were on the paths because I forgot to turn prop anarchy off, so that was annoying. but it's my favorite position on the map because of just how you can see the dam. I think you can see the dam. You can see the river. You can see the canyon that's created from that river, and you can also see the downtown skyline just over the treetops. So it looks really nice, and it's actually where I got the thumbnail for this video, which is actually coming up very soon. You're gonna see me just pop in there with this cinematic camera and just take that screenshot right there. Beautiful. So moving on, the Metro line has the fence track going along it, so anybody who strays off the path into the woods, you know, doesn't get killed by a Metro. But basically, just for the remainder of this video, I just go around putting in trees and putting in bushes and whatnot, fine detailing in the empty areas that are just grass. Actually, one more thing that I do. Oh, huh? One more thing that I do accomplish is this neat trick that I did, where basically I wanted to extend this national road over the canyon, and it was quite a big, it'd be quite a large bridge. However, the bridge options that I have with the national road were quite, I didn't like them. It was just it was the flat road with the straight columns on them. So what I decided to do was I put a Metro line down because the Metro bridges have that nice arch underneath of them. So what I did was I put the Metro line down, then I extended a bridge of the national road directly on top of it with no supports, and I just raised it up using Move It, covered up the Metro lines, and next thing I know, I have this beautiful arched bridge for the national road spanning this large canyon gap. So I thought that looked times better than just using the default national road bridge or any of the variants for the columns. I couldn't really find them. You saw me switching them out earlier, but using the Metro bridge and then just covering up with the national road is probably one of the best things I did for the national park. Well, that's a stretch. It's probably one of the best things I could have done for that bridge, aside from just not including it in general. But I wanted something because, like I said way earlier in the video, there was going to be a little commercial district, maybe even some small housing on the tops of those plateaus, kind of on the outskirts of the national park. I want to say that the national park is mainly just the canyon and not really the areas surrounding the canyon, with the exception of a few. But with that, I think this is going to be the end of this episode. This is just going to be part 1 of this national park development and the surrounding areas around it. I don't have a lot of cinematic shots, but the ones that I do have, I'm going to play them right now. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in the next video. Take care.